How's everybody doing today? Get everybody loaded in. Almost got everybody. Okay, so let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're missing 2. Give it just another minute. All right, Claire, so when do you leave, hon?
I leave tomorrow and I'm coming back on Friday.
Very good. So exciting. You'll have to keep us posted. Let us know how your games are going.
Okay.
All right, here comes Grant. I think Zoe Owens may be our other one. I'm not sure if she's here today or not. Let's see. All righty. How is everybody this morning? Everybody have a good weekend, get some rest, have some fun.
I was out of town all weekend.
Out of town all weekend, okay. So busy weekend, kind of, sometimes we have those weekends where we're kind of glad to be back home so we can rest from our busyness of the weekend. So real quick, before we get started, let's take a look. Any questions about the test so far? I was going to look up, I want to make sure that I've got a place loaded so y'all can upload it. Let me pull that up real quick. I uploaded for different classes this weekend. I can't remember what I did and did not upload. So let's see. Assignments. So technically this is our unit 4. So let me upload real quick. Let me put a place for y'all to upload that because it will need to be uploaded by Thursday. Okay, y'all have until Thursday. So this is the unit 4 test dealing with radicals. Okay, so that's what the assignment name says, is unit 4 test radicals out of 100 points. It is due by Thursday. And let's see, Thursday is the 29th. So there is a place for that. So if you finish it before the 29th, then you want to go ahead and upload it. There's a spot there for you. But the main thing is it is due by Thursday. So any questions about the test before we get started moving on with our graphing stuff?
This is the test we
Everybody
got
good with
last
that?
Thursday.
Yes, the one I gave you Thursday that has the radicals. And remember at the bottom of it, we said the extra credit, we would use the scientific notation would be counted extra credit. And then on the second page, there were two problems. One was dealing with a radical and one was the absolute value equation. And I said we would count the absolute value equation as a bonus as well. Okay, so make sure that you've made yourself a note to make sure that you get that turned in by Thursday. Okay, and I'll of course remind you in class on Thursday. If you haven't turned it in already, you'll have that to remember. So, okay, so on this past Thursday before the weekend, we were working with scientific notation. And so we practiced with that a little bit. And then we moved on to lesson 29, dealing with the coordinate plane. Okay, so I told you guys that we would need graph paper today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. So if you don't have graph paper with you, go ahead and get that real quick. I can't play right now. My dog has brought me a toy and thinks it's time to play. Let's see. Let me pull that email up real quick. So one of the things I want to talk about today as we're kind of kicking off our unit on graphing. Let's see, this is Algebra 1 graphing unit. Back to algebra. All righty. So when we, on Thursday, we talked about how we have a coordinate grid, coordinate plane, whatever you want to call it, and that we have an X and Y axis. Remember that our X axis is the one that runs horizontally. So anytime that you're drawing, anytime that you're getting ready to graph something, you always want to draw your X and Y axis. So we said the X axis is the one that goes horizontally. Your Y axis is the one that goes vertically. Okay. So when I have an ordered pair, remember an ordered pair is going to give me an X value and a Y value. We always write our ordered pairs in parentheses. And when it has the X value, that means I'm going to move along the X axis first. So remember, if it is positive, I'm going to go to the right. If it is negative, I'm going to move to the left because my positive number. So basically think about your X axis as like a number line. Okay. That's exactly what it is. It's a number line. To the right of 0 are my positive values, to the left of 0 are my negative values. And then once I have moved to the right or the left, then I'm going to go along my y-axis, which is my vertical, and I'm going to go up and down. So with my y-axis, if I go up, those are positive. If I go down, that is negative. Okay, so we looked the other day at, like, when I named point A right here, that meant I went to the right 2, and then I went up 1. So my ordered pair was 2, 1. For B, I went to the right 1, and then I went down 2. So because I went right, X is positive, but I went down 2. Oh, that's supposed to be a 1. I went to the right 1, but I went down 2, so that's a -2. So B was 1, -2. Letter C, I went to the left 2. Whoop. So that's -2, and then I went down 1, so that's -1. And then for letter D, I went to the left 1, so that gives me a -1 for X, and up 2, so that's a positive for Y. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at, am I going left or right, up and down? That determines my positives and negatives, okay? Also, remember we talked about when we draw a grid and we have the X and Y axis, that breaks us into 4 different quadrants. Remember, the prefix quad means 4. Our first quadrant, we usually number them by Roman numerals. So quadrant 1 starts in the top right corner, and then I go counterclockwise. So quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. Okay, so those are going to be important things to remember, is which quadrant is which, and to remember your X and Y axis. Okay, so let's go ahead and for a minute, let's get out a piece of graph paper. Go ahead and get a piece of graph paper. And what I want you to do is I want you to fold your graph paper in half. So basically just go end to end and fold it like top to bottom and then side to side. So you end up with your paper folded kind of like this. And then once you've done that, open it up. So you've got kind of your paper is segmented into 4 sections. That is going to be helpful for you as you're making graphs, as you're having to do things on graph paper. Sometimes we don't give ourselves enough space. And so to be able to give yourself enough space to draw your graphs that you need, it'll help to go ahead and if you just fold your paper. Now, once you kind of get comfortable with it and you can draw your own, it's totally up to you. But this is just kind of a strategy to use if you're not sure, how to space up out your graphs and things like that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is on that graph, let me get my screen stretched so I can see everybody. Why can't I get it to stretch? There we go. Okay. So I've done that. So what I'm going to do is on my graph paper, I'm going to pretend like I have, I'm going to pretend like I'm in the top left corner, okay? Since my screen's not as big. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when you're drawing your graph is you want to draw your X and Y axes. So basically in the middle of, actually, I guess I could, let me see if I can make my paper a little bit smaller and I might be able to fit it. Okay. That'll work. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of make a light gray to show like if I had folded my paper in half to show my 4 different sections. Okay, so we'll pretend like that's my paper folded in half. Now within each little grid, I'm going to go ahead and draw my X and Y axis. So remember, X goes side to side. I'm going to label it X. Y goes top to bottom. So go ahead and label you a grid in that top left corner or the top left of your page. So now we've labeled our X and Y axes. And so by marking them like that, it's going to help you to remember when you're graphing an ordered pair, oh yeah, X goes side to side, Y goes up and down. Now, the next thing that I want to do here is the first thing, typically when we are labeling a graph, okay, usually when I'm labeling this, I'm going to go ahead and mark each point as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll go 6 to the right, and I'm going to go 6 to the left. So you can go ahead and -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. So go ahead and graph 6 to the right, 6 to the left. Remember, going to the right, they're going to be positives. To the left, they're negatives. And then I'm going to graph up and down. So if I'm going up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I go down, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Actually, let me fix that real quick because I like having those little hash marks there. Let me. That's not what I wanted. So you can see that each number corresponds with a line, okay? Now, one thing is your graphs don't have to be perfect. You don't have to stress about them being exactly perfect, but they need to be neat enough and they need to be good enough to where it's not just a sloppy mess, and also where you're able to see where those ordered pairs are going to correspond, okay? So each number on your graph is going to correspond with a line. And so let's go ahead and graph the point. Let's graph, I'll write them at the top. Let's go ahead and graph 3, -2. So go ahead and graph the point 3, -2. Now, one of the things that you can do to help you, if you struggle with this, you can go ahead and label it X and Y. And then you can also look at it and say, hey, 3 is positive, so I'm going to move to the right 3 and then down 2. So if you want to label it with arrows and things like that, do what you need to do. So that means I'm going to go right 3, 1, 2, 3. I've gone right 3. And then I'm going to go down 1, 2. So this is where my ordered pair 3, -2 is going to graph. And notice I put a comma in between my two numbers to separate them. So it's not just a 3 and a -2, there's a comma in between them. Okay. Now let's go ahead and graph -5, -5, 3. Well, go away. -5, 3 is the next one we're going to graph. So again, I've got X and Y. Negative tells me I'm moving to the left. 3 tells me I'm going to go up. So if you want to label each one, go ahead. So I'm going to move to the left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I go up 3, 1, 2, 3. And right there is where I would graph -5, 3. Now, one of the things I want to mention is that when you're graphing, you're not going to draw these lines on your paper. I'm just doing that to show you how you're going over and up or over and down, okay? So let's go ahead and graph the point. Let's just graph 4, 4. Okay, so if I'm graphing 4, 4, I'm going to go to the right 4 and up 4. So now I've just put that point, 4, 4. Okay, so when you're graphing points, you're not going to draw your lines. That's just to give you reference to show you I went over and up or over and down, since we're not in class together and you're just going based on my voice. So anyway, so typically when you're graphing a point, it's going to just look like that. Okay. Now, as far as identifying the points you have graphed, there are going to be times where it's a good idea to go ahead and write down what is the ordered pair of that point, okay? So you can always label those points that you're graphing. Later on, we're going to be learning how to graph a line. And so that means there's going to be multiple points on that line. And again, it's going to be helpful for you to go ahead and label those points that you have graphed, because then you're going to be able to look and have a visual connection that if you made a mistake, you can look at the math work that goes along with the graphing to see if you graphed it correctly. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to go over, because I want to talk about a couple of things that we may see as we're graphing, especially in our textbook. They give us some little grids to use, but sometimes they're not going to be big enough for us to use. So when you don't have a big enough space, instead of whipping out another piece of paper, if you still want to graph it in your book, we can do that, but we have to modify our graph a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the grid, to your blank space on the right-hand side. And let's graph us another X and Y axis. So again, X goes side to side. I'm going to label it as X. Y goes up and down. I'm going to label it Y. Now this time as we number, sometimes it may be that for the sake of space, I need to go ahead and instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I might need to save some space and I need to graph by 2s, okay? So what that means is, let me make sure. Okay, so what that means is like I would go ahead and make my little hash marks, but now I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So let's say I was needing to graph something that went to 14, okay? I don't want to have to make a graph that is giant where I've got 14 on this side and 14 on, I don't want to have to make a huge grid. I can count by 2s. Okay. So I can count by 2s if I need to. And I'm not going to take the time to go ahead and graph. So if I can count by 2s, that means I could make a graph counting by 3s. Usually you're not going to count by 4s. That's not going to be, but if you're dealing with odd numbers and you need to count by 3s, you can count by 3s, you can count by 5s, you can count by 10s, okay? So just know that when you're drawing a graph, you can use, but the main thing to remember is whatever numbers I'm using for my x-axis, I also need to use for my y-axis. So that means going up, I'm going to have to go by 2s as well. Even when I go down, I'm going to have to go by 2s. Okay, so whatever numbers I'm using for the x-axis, I also have to use for my y-axis. Okay, so it is totally fine to create graphs with different numbers other than 1, 2, 3, 4. I can count by 2s, I can count by 3s, I can count by 5s, I can go by 10s, whatever I need to do. Okay. The next grid I want you to go ahead and go to, and I want you to graph your x-axis somewhere at the top. Okay, don't do it perfectly in the middle. Typically the middle is going to be helpful, but just go ahead and put your y all the way through the middle so it kind of makes like a cross. Sometimes if I know that I've got to graph something and I need extra space in the bottom, let's say I have a very large y value and I know I'm not going to have enough room. Sometimes I can make a grid that looks like that. And then on the same note, on the right-hand side, you can make one where you have to shift your y-axis over. Okay, so you may be able to do them all where it's perfectly in the middle, and you can count by 1s, 2s, 3s, 5s, 10s, whatever. Or sometimes you may have to shift your graph to where you have a higher or a lower x-axis or a y-axis that's further to the right or the left. Okay, so creating your graphs, there's no one set way that it has to be. The main thing that has to be is that you have an x and y axis and that your numbers correspond. Whatever number system I'm running to the right or the left of my origin, up or down, they all have to correspond. Okay, any questions about that? Everybody good with that? Okay, so like I said, there will be some examples that we'll see in the textbook that we'll see where we have to make our numbers, we have to kind of work with our numbers to make them fit on the graph. But I just wanted to show y'all that there is no one set way. And so we'll go ahead and get back to, all righty, so let's go ahead and turn the page to page 64. All right, so in 64 activities 2, it says to graph each point and identify which quadrant it is in, or if it's at the origin. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let me write these down real quick, and I'm going to flip to a graph paper. 1, 3, 2, -1, -3, 2, -1, -1, 0, 0. Hopefully, when you see that 0, 0, you know immediately. All right, so what we'll do is go ahead and you can use your third grid that you drew, either your third or fourth, it doesn't matter. Just use one of the grids that you've already drawn, or you can get a brand new sheet of paper, totally up to you, okay? But I'm just gonna use one that I've already drawn. And I'm gonna go ahead and write my numbers at the bottom of what I'm trying to graph. I've gotta do 1, 3, 2, -1, -3, 2. These are the ones that are written on your page 62. -1, -1, and 0, 0. All right, so the first one I'm going to graph is going to be 1, 3. Remember, if it's a positive 1, I'm going to the right. If it's a positive 3, I'm going up. So I'm going to go right 1 and up 3. Now, one of the things you can or cannot do, if you're going one-to-one correspondence and you don't want to have to label every single line as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if you're using one-to-one correspondence, you do not have to number your grid. If you're using anything other than ones, I need to know if you're counting by 2s or 3s or 5s or 10s or whatever. So in this situation, I've got 1, 3, so I'm going to go to the right 1 and up 1, 2, 3. So go ahead and plot that point and label it. What quadrant did we graph that in? Think about your quadrants. Good, Claire. 1, quadrant 1. So beside that, so in your textbook, you would just go ahead and write a quadrant 1. And also, if you want to go ahead and label your quadrants, you can. Let's go ahead and graph the second one, 2, -1. So 2, -1 tells me I'm going to go right 2, but then I'm going to go down 1. So I'm going to go right 2, 1, 2, and then down 1. So this is where 2, -1 would be graphed. And which quadrant is this?
4.
4, good. So I'm going to use my Roman numeral 4, which is IV, okay? My next one is -3, 2. So that means I'm going left 3. Oh, let me change my color real quick. I'm going to go to the left 3, and then I'm going to go up 2. So I'm going to go left 1, 2, 3, and up 1, 2. So that's going to be -3, +2. And what quadrant is that?
2.
2. Good. And then my last one is going to be -1, -1. So that means I'm moving to the left 1 and down 1. So left 1, down 1, gonna be right there. And I've got -1, -1. And what quadrant is that?
3.
3. All right, my last point is 0, 0. So I know that's going to be smack dab in the middle where my two lines intersect. And so if it says what quadrant or origin, what is this one?
The origin.
the origin. Any questions on activities 3? Any questions on how to know where to graph or how to graph? Any questions on knowing my quadrants? All righty, so for activities 3, I'm going to go ahead and move over to this graph that I drew over here, except for I'm probably going to need to move that y-axis. So I'm going to fix that. All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and do activities 3. It says graph the points on your own paper. Draw line segments between consecutive points. So basically what that means is when I graph point A and I graph point B, draw a line to connect A to B. Draw a line to connect B to C, C to D, and so on, and then to J. And then the last direction say, draw a segment joining A to J. So you're going to do A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E, E to F, E to F to G, G to H, H to I to J, and then you'll connect J back to A. Okay, so go ahead and work on that. And when you're finished, look up and see if your figure looks like mine. Okay, so as you're checking, if your figure didn't turn out the same way, look and see what you missed and why you missed it. Did you go up when you were supposed to go down? Did you go left when you were supposed to go right? All that good stuff. So kind of check through it and see if you missed something. If not, fantastic. You're pretty comfortable with graphing. All righty. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and turn to lesson 30 on page 65. Page 65, lesson 30. Okay, so what this says in lesson 30, it says, so far you have learned how to solve one variable equation. So in one variable equation is like if you have 2x plus 3 equals 9. Okay, we've learned how to solve something like that where I'd subtract 3, 2x equals 6, divide by 2, and x equals 3. Okay, so we know that when I have one variable, I can solve using my properties of equality to be able to add, subtract, multiply, or divide, to be able to get x by itself, to isolate x and be able to solve for that variable. Okay, so that's what that means when I deal with a one variable equation. But what happens is when I have a two variable equation, these are called linear equations. So this is what two variable equations are called linear equations. And the thing I want you to look at just above that is that some equations have an infinite number of solutions. And I want you to circle that word infinite. Okay, so in the directions, so far you have learned how to solve one variable equations. These equations have exactly one solution. Some equations have an infinite number of solutions, and these are two variable equations, also called linear equations. Okay, so when it says that it's an infinite number of solutions, there is no way you could possibly write down all of the possible answers for a two variable equation. Okay, one variable, I can handle that. I can write down one answer. I'm good with that. But if I have an infinite number, you can't possibly write down all the solutions. And that's why we have to use a line. So I want you to go ahead and circle that word linear. And the word linear means it's going to be a line. So those first four letters say line. So a linear equation is one that is graphed as a line. Okay. So the example they give us is 2x minus y equals 3 is a two variable equation. To solve a two variable equation, begin by writing the equation so that one variable is isolated on one side of the equation and all of the terms are on the other side of the equation. So in this situation, that means I'm going to isolate y. The reason I'm going to isolate y is because it doesn't notice that 2x has a number 2 with it. And that means I'd have to divide everything by 2, so it's going to get real messy. I don't want to have to deal with that. So what I want to do is look at the variable that's by itself, and I'm going to isolate that variable. So if you wanted to write it the other way, you could also have it as y equals 2x minus 3. Remember, whether my y is on the left or on the right, exactly the same, just a mirror image, okay? So in this situation, we've been able to solve for y. Any questions on that so far? Okay, and it says in this case, X is called the independent variable because you can substitute any value for X. So basically, if I wanted to say, hey, let X equal something, I could plug that in right there for my X value. I could plug in my number. I could do 2 times whatever that number is, subtract 3, and I have found the solution for Y. So X is the independent variable and Y is the dependent variable because my value for Y depends on what I use for X. Does that make sense? So whatever my value for Y is going to depend on what I choose to use for X. So one of the ways to do this is to use a T-chart. So it says, once you have identified the independent and dependent variables, you can solve for variables, for values of that variable. Make a T-chart with one variable on each side. Choose several values for the independent variable. So step 1 is to make a T-chart. I'm going to put a 1 by that. Step 2 is to choose several values for the independent variable or for X. So that's going to be step 2. Substitute each value into the equation will be step 3. And then step 4 is to write your solutions in the coordinate format. Okay, so step 1 is T-chart. Step 2 is choose values for X. Step 3 is to solve using values of X. And step 4 is to write solution as an ordered pair. And remember, ordered pair means X, Y. So notice in this situation, they've set up a T-chart. They have put X on my left-hand side and Y on the right-hand side. Now my original equation that we are using is up here, Y equals 2X minus 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write this right here, Y equals 2X minus 3. I like to go ahead and write what Y equals on that right-hand side. Okay, that will help you because that's your original equation that you're going to be plugging in the value of X. Notice how they use their parentheses here. Okay, remember I told you that each time you're substituting a variable or substituting a number for a variable, use those parentheses because you may have positives and you may have negatives. Chad?
Could you repeat the 4th step again?
Sure, the 4th step is to write the solution as an ordered pair. We're writing it as an XY.
On a coordinate plane?
Yes, well, you're just writing the solution. The next step after that would be to graph it, but right now we're just writing it. Okay, we're not graphing it yet. We're just using our T-chart. So notice if we're using the original equation of Y equals 2X minus 3, the first thing we're doing is we're substituting 0 in for X. Okay, now another thing is this one is not showing all the work here. So I would have 2 times 0 is 0 and 0 minus 3 equals negative 3. Okay, so they've just done all the work already to show you. So that is where this negative 3 comes from right here, because 2 times 0 is 0 and 0 minus 3 is negative 3. So now I prefer, what I like to do is I like to have a third column to where I can write my ordered pair. So that would be 0, negative 3. They chose to write it down at the bottom. Okay, it's up to you how you want to do this. I like to go ahead and have all my ordered pairs right there in front of me. So then when I do graph, I can see it right there, but if you want to write it at the bottom, that's totally up to you, okay? I just like to add a little third column. So again here, now I'm going to plug in 1. So when I look at my problem, I've got 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 minus 3 is -1. So the ordered pair here is 1, -1. Then they've plugged in the value of 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. So my ordered pair is 2, 1. Plug in a -1. 2 times -1, this is where we have to be careful. What's 2 times -1? It's going to be a -2, right? So now I have -2 minus 3. -2 minus 3 equals -5. Remember, if I start with a negative and I take away more, I end with a larger negative. If you struggled with positives and negatives, you're going to need to take extra care as you're going through these, because if you have the wrong ordered pair, your graph is going to be way off. So here we substituted -1 for x, so we have -1, -5 is our ordered pair. -2 we're plugging in, so -2 times -2 is -4. And -4 minus 3 is going to be -7. So my ordered pair here is -2, -7. Like I said, I like to make a third column and write my x and y out beside it. If you just want to write them along the bottom, that's fine as well. It's whatever you choose to do. But now, if my directions told me to graph, I would have a whole set of ordered pairs that I'd be able to graph. We're not going to do that just yet, but I just want you to see now I've got a whole bunch of points that I can graph. Now, one of the things that I have to know is to be able to graph a line, I have to have at least 2 points, okay? I've got to have a beginning and an end. When I am graphing for linear equations, I want to have a minimum of 3 points. But usually we're going to have 5, just because 5 points is going to help us. So when you're setting up T-charts, this is a good set of numbers to use. You're always going to want to have the origin. You want to have 2 positive and 2 negative. So that gives you 5 numbers. So use 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. So that's what we're going to do up here. We're going to be making a chart that gives 5 possible solutions for each equation. Okay. So like I said, I like to set up a 3 column. So I'm going to do x, y equals x, and then I'm going to do my ordered pair x, y. My values for x, I'm going to use 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. Use the origin, 2 positive, 2 negative. Now here's the deal. You could pick any numbers you want to, but just remember, the bigger your numbers are, the more spread out they're going to be on the graph. So especially when you don't want to draw a huge graph on your paper. So if I use smaller values, the more tight my graph is going to be. I'm not going to have to use a whole piece of paper for a graph. That's the purpose of using 1 and 2, -1 and 2. All right, so here I'm going to have y equals parentheses. What am I going to substitute? What am I going to put in my parentheses? What number am I substituting for x? I'm putting in a 0, right? So I don't have any calculations to do here. I just know that y equals 0. So my ordered pair, if x is 0, then I found that y is also 0. So this one's going to be pretty easy because y equals, I'm going to go ahead and just set up all my parentheses. Okay, so on this one, y equals 1. So my ordered pair will be 1, 1. Y equals 2. So my ordered pair will be 2, 2. Y equals -1, -1, -1. Y equals -2. So I've got -2, -2. So if y equals the same thing as x, then my x and y values of my ordered pair are going to be identical. Any questions about that? All right, the next one we do have a calculation for. So I'm going to set up x, y equals 2x minus 1. Then I'm going to do x and y. I know my values I'm using are going to be 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. So once you get that set up, now we're going to start plugging in our values. So I'm going to have y is equal to 2. I'm going to do parentheses for x minus 1. I'm going to plug in 0 for x. And now I'm going to do my calculation. So know that you don't have to do it in your head. If you want to do it right below, 2 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 1 equals -1. So you can see that I actually wrote my calculations out right underneath. So now I know that if x is 0, y is -1. Any questions on how I did that?
How come both aren't -1?
Because we said that x is 0. I'm plugging in the value of x, which is 0. Okay, so it's going to be 0, -1. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, let's look at the next one. For my x value of 1, I'm going to have y equals 2 times, I'm going to use my parentheses, minus 1. Then I'm going to plug in a 1 in parentheses. I'm going to do my calculations. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 minus 1 equals 1. So in this situation, when x is 1, y is also 1. Because 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 minus 1 is 1. Now let's solve for 2. I've got 2 times, got my parentheses set up, so I'm going to plug in my number 2. Now do my calculation. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 1 equals 3. So if x is 2, y is 3. The next one, y equals 2. Set up my parentheses, minus 1. I'm plugging in a -1. I know when I'm working with negatives, I've got to be super careful. I've got to pay close attention. So 2 times -1 is -2. -2 minus 1. This is where I owe mom $2 and I've just borrowed another $1. How much do I owe her now? $3. I start with a negative and take something away. I end up with a larger negative. Remember that -2 minus 1 is the same as -2 plus a -1. So if you need to rewrite it like that, to where you change your subtraction to addition to help you, do whatever you've got to do to help you with your negative numbers. Okay. And the last one, y equals 2. Do my parentheses. In my parentheses, I'm going to plug in a -2. Again, being super careful when I deal with my negatives. 2 times -2 is going to be -4. -4 minus 1 equals -5. Whoop, I forgot to write my ordered pair for -1. -1, -3. And then for -2, if x is -2, y is -5. So I've ended up with the ordered pairs 0, -1, 1, 1, 2, 3, -1, -3, and -2, -5. Chad?
How do you find out what y is?
Okay, do you see where I plugged in my value of x in red in the middle? So if we look at this one right here, we said if we're going to plug in -2 for x. And so right there, I plugged it in my original equation. It shows me where to plug the number in. Okay, so I use the original equation. I plug in different values in that same exact spot of the equation, and I do the calculations. So remember we said X is my independent variable. So I'm going to put that in, and then Y is going to change based on what X is. All right, let's look at the last one. Now, notice what do I have in front of this over here? I'll change colors so it doesn't get too mixed up. Okay, I'm working with this one. All right. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to have X, Y equals 3 times X plus 1. And then I'm going to have X, Y. 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. So this middle part is exactly what my equation is. My left-hand column are the variable and the values that I'm going to let be X. Okay, 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. My middle column I'm using, that's my equation. My right-hand column is X and Y. Once you get that set up, I've gone a little bit over on our break time. So once you've got your table set up, you can take a break and we'll come back in 5 minutes and work it out. All right, is everybody about ready to come back?
I'm back.
You're back. All righty. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at this T-chart that we drew. I guess technically it's not a T-chart anymore since I added a column to it. But let's go ahead and take a look at, we're going to need to plug everything in and solve for our Y values. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. So this is where I write out my equation, Y equals 3. I'm going to do parentheses, and I've got +1, but inside there, I'm going to put parentheses. Whoop, I didn't make it big enough. Let me fix that. Remember, I'm putting parentheses to put my value of X in. Okay, so we're saying this time it is 0. So 3 times 0 is, oh, sorry, I messed that up. Remember, I've got 3 times something in parentheses. Okay, so I've got to be real careful about my order of operations. Remember, I've got to work inside parentheses first. So 0 plus 1 is 1. So now I have 3 times 1 is 3. So if X is 0, Y is 3. I'm going to do the same thing with 1. Y equals 3 times, I've got my parentheses to put in my value of X, plus 1. My value of X is going to be 1. So now I have 3 times 1 plus 1 is 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. So if X is 1, Y is 6. Plug in for 2. Y equals 3 times, parentheses for X, plus 1. I am plugging in a 2 for X. So I have 3 times 2 plus 1 is 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. So if X is 2, Y is 9. Y equals 3 times, parentheses for X, plus 1. Now I'm plugging in a -1, so I know I've got to be super careful here. So I've got 3 times -1 plus 1 is going to be 0. So 3 times 0 is 0. So if X is -1, Y is 0. And then finally, Y equals 3, parentheses, put my parentheses for X, plus 1. I'm plugging in a -2. So -2 plus 1. Okay, so think about this again. Be very careful with your positives and negatives. -2 plus 1 is -1. And 3 times -1 is -3. So that means if X is -2, Y is -3. Any questions on how we set up that table, why we did what we did, and how we came up with any of our numbers?
So we don't use the distributive property?
Okay, let's look at that. If you had used the distributive property, I'm sorry?
Because I used that and I got a different answer on some of them.
Okay, so let's take a look at that. If you had used the distributive property, let's look at that real quick. Actually, I might get a whole nother sheet of paper to work that. So we've got Y equals 3 times X plus 1 is our equation. So let me get.
I did
That's you.
distributive property, but I got the same answers you did.
Okay, so we're going to look at it. So we started out with y equals 3 times x plus 1. So had I used the distributive property, I would have y equals 3x plus 3. Was that the equation you had, Kinsley? Did you have 3x plus 3? Sorry, you're muted.
I see what I did now. I forgot to I distributed after I made the x like a 0 and 1, 2.
Okay. Oh, okay. Then here, let's do that. Okay, so y equals 3 times x plus 1, and then xy. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. So if I did that and I had y equals 3 times 0 plus 1, and I distributed 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 1 is 3. So 0 plus 3, I've got 0, 3. Okay, y equals 3 times 1 plus 1. So 3 times 1 is 3, plus 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 plus 3 is 6. And I'm sorry, I didn't put these in parentheses. Y equals 3 times 2 plus 1. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3, so that's going to be 9. Y equals 3, if I had my -1 plus 1. 3 times -3, I'm sorry, 3 times -1 would be -3. And then 3 times a +1 would be +3. So -3 plus 3 is 0. And then y equals 3 times -2 plus 1. Again, 3 times -2 would be -6. 3 times 1 is 3. So -6 plus 3 is going to be -3. Okay, so even if you use the distributive property, you should still end up with the same answers that we got not using the distributive property and starting with parentheses. Okay, so either method you choose, you should still end up getting the same answer. So did you say you figured out what you did, Kinsley? Perfect. All right. So let's review our steps real quick. Step 1, we said, was to make a T-chart. Step 2, and like I said, if you want to make it a 3-column chart like I did, then you just do a double T-chart. So make your chart. 2 is to choose our several values for x. Remember, we said we're going to use 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. Okay. Whenever you are left to choose your values for x, those are the ones I recommend you using. Now, you may see a problem at some point and it says, let these values be x and solve for x. Then you would use whatever the problem told you to use, okay? But if they did not tell you what to use, sub in 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. Step 3 is to substitute each value and do the calculation. And then step 4 is to write your ordered pair, write your coordinate pair, okay? So that's what we did with each of these. We made our chart, we chose our values of x, we substituted them to solve for y, and we wrote our answer as an ordered pair. Any questions about that? All right, let's go ahead and look at activities 2 at the bottom of the page. It says to solve each 2-variable equation when x equals 5. So all this is saying is, hey, let's substitute x is 5. So here I'm just plugging in 5 as x. So y equals 5 minus 2. 5 minus 2 is 3. So basically this would be like one step of this would be like the middle step in our chart where we're just plugging in a value. So y equals 2 times, I'm going to plug in 5 So again, y equals 2 times 5 is 10. Then you have plus 3, so y equals 13. Then on the last one, y equals 3 times x plus 1. Huh?
I missed the one you just did.
Okay. We plugged in 5. So basically what these are the exact same, well, no, they're not. Sorry, I thought they were, I guess just the last one is the exact same as the chart we just looked at. So I just wrote parentheses for x. I put in the value of 5 that they told me to substitute for. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 3 is 13. So once I have my number in there, I just use my order of operations.
Do you write your answer as y equals something, or do you write it as
Yeah, so
ordered pair?
in this situation, it just said to solve for y. It did not say I had to write it as an ordered pair. So just main thing is whatever the directions tell me to do. All right, and then the last one, y equals 3x. Look, I forgot to write I don't want x, I want it to be parentheses. And that is where I'm going to plug in my 5. So again, here you could either solve using order of operations and go in parentheses. And so you have 3 times 6, so y equals 18. Or if you had done y equals 3 times 5 plus 1, plug in my 5. Now I'm going to distribute. 3 times 5 is 15. Plus 3 times 1 is 3. So y equals 18. Either way, I'm going to end up with the same answer. I can either distribute it or I can use order of operations and go parentheses, then multiply. All right, now let's look at the next page. Let's see, that's going to be page 66. The directions say find 5 possible solutions for each equation and draw the graph of each equation. Okay, so we're going to work one together. We're going to draw the chart and then we will graph it. So again, notice you've got 4 graphs on this page that you're going to have to do. So get a piece of graph paper, fold it in half. Once you've done that, you'll have 4 little and you'll have 4 separate areas to draw a graph. So let's see, let's do the bottom left problem. Okay, we're going to do the y equals 2x plus 1. So I'm going to set up my chart. So I have x, my middle will be y equals 2x plus 1. And then I'm going to have my x, y coordinates. So set up your chart. What are my 5 values I'm going to use for x? 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. Okay, now I'm going to have y equals 2, put parentheses for x plus 1. I'm going to plug in 0 there. 2 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 1 equals 1. So my ordered pair will be 0, 1. If x is 0, then y equals 1. The next one, y equals 2 times, plug in 1. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. So if x is 1, y is 3. Plug in for 2. Y equals 2, parentheses, plus 1. Plugging in my value of 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 plus 1 equals 5. So if x is 2, y is 5. Plug in for -1, y equals 2. Write my parentheses. In those parentheses, I'm going to plug in -1. This is where I've got to be careful with my variables. I mean, not my variables, my negatives. 2 times -1 is -2. -2 plus 1. Okay, -2 plus 1 is a -1. Remember, opposite signs, take the sign of the larger, find the difference. So if x is -1, y is also -1. And then the last one, y equals 2. I'm going to write my parentheses plus 1. In parentheses, I write a -2. 2 times -2 is -4. -4 plus 1 is -3. So if x is -2, y is -3. Let me write those down before I change my screen. Make sure you finish those up. So now we have 5 ordered pairs that we're going to graph. 0, 1, 1, 3, 2, 5, -1, -1, and -2, -3. So I'm going to leave my screen up for just a minute for you to look at your chart. Make sure your chart is like my chart. All right, I'm going to pull up some graph paper. So go ahead and get out your graph paper. All right, remember the first thing that you want to do when you're getting ready to make a graph is we're going to do our x and y axes. So I'm going to go about midway for my x, about midway for my y, and go ahead and label them x and y. Whoop. Let me make them darker. X, Y. All right, so our first one, what we're going to do is we're going to graph our ordered pairs. Graph 0, 1. 0, 1 means that if x is 0, I do not go anywhere from the origin. I stay at the origin. I do not go left. I do not go right. But since y is 1, I'm going to go up 1. So there's 0, 1. My next one is 1, 3. Because 1 is positive, I move to the right 1. Because y is positive, I go up 3. 1, 2, 3. So my ordered pair there is 1, 3. Okay. My next one is 2, 5. Move to the right 2, up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 5. You should start seeing a pattern going here. Then I've got -1, -1. Move to the left 1 and down 1. -1, -1. And then I have -2, -3. Move to the left 2, 1, 2, and down 3. 1, 2, 3. -2, -3. So remember, I told you that when I'm graphing, that I have my ordered pairs, x and y. We talked about a minute ago at the beginning of this lesson that when I have an equation that has both an x and a y value, I have to solve for both x and y. The way I can do that is by plugging in values for X to see what would Y be when I plug it into that equation. So now what I'm going to do is when I have all of my points graphed, I'm going to graph them. I'm going to connect my dots with a straight line. Okay, so now I'm going to go from all my points, and I'm going to do the best I can to make it as straight as I can. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, one of the things I do want to do, though, is when I graph, I want to extend beyond my furthest point on either side, and I want to write an arrow on either end. So I connect my dots, extend through my furthest 2 points, and write arrows on the end. What do those arrows indicate?
That it keeps going.
That my line keeps going. So if I kept going in the same pattern, my line goes infinitely. Remember, we talked about how when I have an equation with 2 variables, there's an infinite number of solutions. So I can see that wherever this line goes, all of my possible X and Y coordinates are possible solutions for the equation of this line. So that is why we're graphing it as a line. We just found 5 answers for it. I cannot possibly find all of the answers for it because it would extend indefinitely in both directions, and I could keep on solving for the rest of my life and I would never finish this one problem. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to be settled with 5, draw a line, put some arrows at the end, and go for it. Now, one of the things to be very careful of, if I'm graphing, let's say that I was graphing, I'm going to take my line out real quick. Let's say I was graphing, and let's say I'm going to do, I'm going to move this -1, -1. Let's pretend like I did not graph that there. And I said, oh, that was 1, -1. And I graphed it right here as 1. And I said, oh, that's -1, -1, but it's in the wrong place. Notice how when this is out there and it doesn't fall in line with my other dots, that is a red flag to me. This is a problem. I have made a mistake. Either I have made a mistake in my graphing, which I did. It should be over here at -1. So this one was a graphing mistake, or if I made a mistake in my calculations when I was doing my chart, maybe I multiplied incorrectly, maybe I added incorrectly, maybe I messed up with my positives and negatives, okay? So if you have a point on your graph or multiple points, if you graph and it doesn't make a straight line, then that's an indicator to you that there's been a mistake made. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is, number 1, look at your ordered pairs and see if you graphed them properly. If you didn't plot them properly, that might be the mistake. If you did, then you need to look back at your chart and recalculate each of your values. Go through, make sure that when you substituted the value for X and solved for Y, did you do your calculations properly? Okay, so that's going to be kind of some things that will help you to know, did you do it correctly or not? All righty. So I know that we've taken the whole day today for this one lesson, but that's because I wanted to make sure that we are working through it. I want to make sure that everybody understands, that everybody's comfortable with this. So right now it is 11:51. We've got about 15 minutes before class is out. Okay, we are going to work on page 66. We're going to finish this up right now in class. Okay, so you're going to make your charts. We've already done the first, we've done the bottom one. So we made our chart for the bottom one and we just graphed it. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and number these. And so you can, so this is number 1, this is number 2, number 3, number 4. So on that graph that you just did, you can go ahead and number it as number 3 on page 66. Okay, so that way you know that's the graph that goes along with number 3 on page 66. Now, if you used a brand new sheet of graph paper, you should have 3 more blank squares left to be able to graph the next problems. So let's go ahead and work on the other 3. I'll help you go ahead and get your table set up for the first one. remember where you have x, y equals negative 2x, and then x, y. My 5 numbers I'm going to use are 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. Make sure you give yourself enough room when you're doing your charts. Don't try to make them teeny tiny, because then when you do your calculations in the middle column, it may squinch up too much and it may cause you to make a mistake. So be sure to spread it out enough. So we're going to have y equals -2 times something. So that's going to be also, if you're kind of if you like to go ahead and get the, written part out of the way, you could go all the way down, because you're doing the exact same thing for your middle column. Then you can plug in 0, 1, 2, -1, -2, and then do your calculations. So I'll leave that sample up for you to look at. You're working on the first, second, and fourth ones. After you get your ordered pairs, graph them. Zoe, I know you came in a little bit late. So what we're doing is we're just setting up a graph. We've chosen 5 numbers to plug in for the value of x. And then we're just solving. Whenever we solve for that, so like this first one that we're doing, if I have -2 times 0, that equals 0. So if x is 0, y is 0. So basically I'm plugging in my number and solving for y. If you have questions, you're welcome to stay after class for a minute and ask me questions, okay?
Miss Jennifer,
Yes.
are we supposed to be doing this on a separate piece of paper?
No, because this is classwork. It is not homework that will be turned in. So you're making your chart. If you want to do it on separate paper, that's fine, but you do not have to turn this in. We're doing it right now in class. So you're going to do the work in your book, and then the graph will be on another piece of paper.
Miss Jennifer, is it supposed to end up in a straight line? Because
should.
mine didn't.
Okay, so look back.
Okay.
Look and see, did you incorrectly graph something, or did you make a calculation error?
I probably made a calculation error.
Okay, so go back and check and see if you can figure out where. I'll go ahead and start working out the tables so you can check yours as you go.
Can you subtract stuff from 0?
Remember, 0 minus something is going to give you a negative number. So like 0 minus 1 is -1. 0 minus 5 is -5. All right, so we've got like another minute left. If you have not finished this page, I want you to go ahead and finish up your tables and graph them. That is what we will start with on Thursday, is we will check them, okay? I want you to finish them. You do not have to upload anything. The only thing that you do have to upload by Thursday is your Unit 4 test on radicals, okay? So I want you to finish this. If you haven't finished your 4 tables, finish your tables. Once you have your ordered pairs, you'll need to graph the 3 additional tables, okay? So graph those lines. Once you've done that, remember your test is due Thursday. So just finish this and do your test. Your test is the only thing you need to upload. Any questions before we go? If you have trouble between now and Thursday, if as you're graphing these, you make a mistake, let me know and I'll be happy to help you, okay? But remember, if your lines don't work out, first look to see did you plot them correctly, and then second, if you plotted everything correctly but it's still not working out, then you know you've got a calculation error. The places to be super duper careful are going to be with those negative numbers, okay? Be super careful with your negatives. If you don't have any questions, you're more than welcome to go, and I will see you guys on Thursday. I hope you'll have a good couple of days. And good luck with your test.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, you're welcome.
Oh, sorry, Miss Jennifer. I was trying to finish this.
Oh, you're good. That's okay. That's why I wanted to make sure that we've got everything, that you've got everything you need.
Okay, well, thanks for class.
You're so welcome. See you Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.